In today's video, let's tackle questions 3 and 4 from the 2022 AP Biology FRQ in one go. Hey guys, this is Mikey from Avo Prep Academy, and you're joining me today on another episode of FRQ Fridays, where each Friday we solve AP Bio FRQ problems. So if this sounds like your thing, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. So numbers 3 through 6 on the AP Bio exam are these smaller type of questions, typically based on concepts drawn from 1 or 2 units from the course. So as we read, we should be thinking about which unit or units we're working with. So let's go ahead and start with number 3. Fireflies emit light when the enzyme luciferase catalyzes a reaction in which its substrate, D-luciferin, reacts to form oxy-luciferin and other products. In order to determine the optimal temperature for this enzyme, scientists added ATP to a solution containing D-luciferin, luciferase, and other substances needed for the reaction. They then measured the amount of light emitted during the first 3 seconds of the reaction when it was carried out at different temperatures. Alright, so from just reading the passage, we're able to identify that we're looking at a question that draws from concepts that pertain to enzymes. In AP Biology, we're first introduced to enzymes in Unit 1 during our discussion of proteins. We then see their actions in a little bit more detail in Unit 3, where we discuss enzymes, feedback systems, and all of that good stuff. Now, we can also see that we're dealing with an experiment, meaning that we're most likely going to have to use our knowledge of experimental design. Okay, so A says, describe a characteristic of the luciferase enzyme that allows it to catalyze the reaction. So often students see questions like this and freeze. They say, well, we haven't learned about luciferase in class, so how do I know anything about the characteristic of luciferase? But the truth is that AP Biology is a fairly general course, meaning that we're only supposed to answer with just the right amount of detail regarding enzymes as outlined in the course and exam description. So for this question, the appropriate answer is in reference to how enzymes work, and that is binding their substrate to their active site. So the idea is that because the enzyme has a specific structure, particularly its active site, it has the capacity to bind to its target substrate and undergo necessary chemical or physical changes to catalyze the reaction by reducing that activation energy. That is the sufficient level of detail that AP is looking for. So let's move on to part B. Identify the dependent variable in the experiment. So this is a straightforward identify problem, so while we do have to write in full sentences, we don't really have to be very long-winded. Now remember that the dependent variable is what we're measuring in an experiment. Typically, we set up some independent variable with its different treatment groups that we get to choose, and then we measure how it affects the dependent variable. So in here, they say that we measure the amount of light emitted during the first 3 seconds, and that's all we really have to write. Now moving on to C, state the null hypothesis for the experiment. Now, if you're currently on or have already finished Unit 5, then you'd have learned about something called statistical techniques, including the chi-squared analysis. In experiments where we use statistics to determine significance of the outcome, we, by definition, use null hypotheses and alternate hypotheses to support or refute that claim. The null hypothesis, as the name suggests, implies that there's no effect of the independent variable on our dependent variable. And since the passage suggests that we altered the temperature to see the effect of that variable on light being emitted, we can simply state something like this. Temperature had no effect on the amount of light emitted during the first 3 seconds of the experiment. Okay, so the last part is always the trickiest one, but let's take a look. A student claims that as temperature increases, there will be an increase in the amount of reaction in the first 3 seconds. Support the student's claim. Alright, so now we're finally getting to the more conceptual framework behind enzymes and their actions. First, keep in mind that we're looking at a question that asks us to support a claim, which means that we have to take it at face value that the claim is true, and we are to provide the relevant biological knowledge or concepts to support that claim. So if we take a look at a very typical enzyme activity plotted against temperature, we see a bell-shaped curve. This curve shows several things. So for one, we see the optimal temperature as depicted as the tip of that curve. But what's happening on either side of this optimal point is where things get interesting. So in Unit 1, we learned that as temperature increases, the bonds and intermolecular forces that hold proteins together can become compromised, thereby denaturing the protein structure. With the loss of that structure comes the loss of function. But that's not quite what this question is about. The student claims that as temperature increases, the enzymatic rate is also increasing. Therefore, we can assume that the experimental design set several temperatures below this optimal point and then steadily increased it. And here on the left side of that curve, we're not dealing with the denaturation aspect, but rather the lack of sufficient kinetic energy. In physics and chemistry, we talk about something called the kinetic molecular theory, where we describe things in systems moving randomly about and sometimes colliding with one another. Enzymes and substrates follow that same logic. Yet, we also learn that as heat increases in a system, so do the kinetic energy of the molecules. Simply put, molecules move faster at higher temperatures, thereby increasing the probability of collision per rate of time. So while you don't have to get super technical for AP biology, you should still say something like this. As temperature increases, enzymes and substrates move faster within the system, thereby increasing the likelihood of a reaction taking place. Therefore, with higher temperatures, there should be an increase in the amount of reaction as measured in the experiment. Alright then, let's move on to question number 4. Existing isolated brook trout populations in Newfoundland, Canada were once part of a larger population that was fragmented at the end of the most recent glaciation period about 10 to 12,000 years ago. Researchers investigated 14 naturally separated stream populations of brook trout. They found that the populations are all genetically distinct and show differences in morphology. Alright, so this is one of my absolute favorite units from AP Bio, which is Unit 7 on evolution. Now, at the time of releasing this video, I highly doubt that many schools have covered Unit 7 yet, but depending on your teacher or school, maybe you have. But seeing as how most of you are likely watching this video in May anyway, I'll pretend like you all know exactly what I'm talking about as we go through this question. So A says, describe the prezygotic barrier that results in these genetically distinct populations. In evolution, we learn about barriers to reproduction between populations that can keep species separate, or perhaps a population that is beginning to diverge reinforced in that speciation path. Prezygotic barriers are in reference to factors that inhibit individuals from two populations or a species from forming a zygote, or basically eggs that's been fertilized. So typically, we say that there are several kinds of barriers, which include the following. Habitat isolation, where individuals don't exist in the same area, temporal isolation, where mating seasons or times don't overlap, behavior isolation, where mating rituals or the songs of a male birds don't entice the females, and so on. But in this particular case, they literally say that these 14 populations were fragmented into separated stream populations, so we're definitely looking at habitat isolation. So we say that the trout populations experienced habitat isolation, where mating between members of separated populations were unlikely to occur due to the spatial separation. And that's basically it. Now B says, brook trouts with longer fins are able to swim faster than those with shorter fins. In one of the Newfoundland streams, the main prey of the brook trout evolved to move faster. For brook trouts living in the stream, explain the difference in fitness between longer-finned individuals and shorter-finned individuals. So here we're dealing with a very standard model of natural selection, where if the prey of these trouts become faster, then there is a selectional pressure against slower fish, while faster fish would fare better due to their ability to catch food. Subsequently, they'd probably have more babies, resulting in the entire population becoming faster, and by extension, having longer fins. So I would say something like this. Longer finned individuals would swim faster than shorter finned individuals, which would allow them to catch their prey more effectively, resulting in acquiring more resources to increase their chance of producing more offspring. The key is having more offspring here. Fitness, as defined by biology, is about how many babies you leave behind, so make sure that you add that to the part here. Let's look at C. If two morphologically and behaviorally distinct populations of brook trout remain isolated for many generations, predict the likely impact on both populations. In macroevolution, where we study speciation, we learn that the single most important contributor to the divergence of populations as distinct species is reproductive isolation. This is because with reproductive isolation, each population would acquire changes to their genome independently through selection, mutation, and so forth until their genomes would not be sufficiently compatible when those gametes meet. So here we would simply say that if the two populations remain isolated, then the reproductive isolation would result in speciation that would lead to further divergence in behavior, morphology, and genetics. All right, let's take a look at the last question. Researchers claim that there are more genetic differences between any two current brook trout populations than there are between any single current population and the ancestral brook trout population from which all the trouts are descended. Provide reasoning to justify this claim. So this question is surprisingly difficult, and even though it might be worth only 1 point out of 4, it's still worth investigating and trying to get all the points anyway. So let's break this down. Imagine that we're looking at a cladogram that looks something like this. Here we see that there are two sister taxa, species A and B, which both descended from this common ancestor down here. The question is asking why there are fewer genetic differences between the species A and the ancestor as compared to between A and B, and likewise the difference between B and the ancestor should also be less than A and B. So to understand why this is the case, we have to look at what happens to genomes over time. Even if we were to take away natural selection, sexual selection, and genetic drift, we know that there is this underlying potential for random mutations to create changes to genomes over time. So if we just focus on the common ancestor and species A, well, let's imagine for a moment that over this time frame, species A accumulated 6 mutations, thereby having 6 differences in nucleotides compared to the ancestor. And maybe this is happening at some region of its DNA. On the other side, let's say that species B accumulates 4 mutations since its divergence from the ancestor. Now, all of this is pretty sensible, but here is what isn't sensible. It's highly unlikely that the mutations that species A incurred and those that species B incurred would be the exact same mutations at the same location. This would mean that the difference that now exists between A and B would actually be the sum of the differences each species would have to their ancestor, meaning that the difference between A and B would be 10 nucleotides. So it's actually pretty tricky to think about it this way. But to put it simply, we would say that the mutation each population accumulated would be different, resulting in greater differences between the two populations that are current compared to the differences between any of those populations to the ancestral population. Okay, so today we mostly dealt with enzymes and evolution. Hopefully, this video has helped clarify some background information as well as gave you some tips on how to solve these AP Bio FRQ. So until next week, this is Mikey signing out. Have a great weekend.